All right, welcome to this week's video at Red Bandy Outdoors. I'm Scott, fish biologist turned YouTuber, living the dream, being the star of my own fishing show on TV. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to talk about jig durability today, what you need to know. What's it all about? Well, I've got some footage I'll throw up there while I'm talking, but this jig right here, this is the BMC Neon Moon Eye. Here's one right here we're going to be talking about in the package. This is the 1/16th. I caught 7 fish on this jig on my trip to Montana this past October. Most jigs aren't going to last that long. You know, I retied this one several times. I used it several days. I'd fish with the nymphs and then come back and fish with this and then finish up at the end of the day. I have a video, I'll link it at the end. I think it's called Small Jigs or whatever, where I fish this run and catch a couple nice ones on this. And then I show some footage while I'm talking about some other ones I caught when my batteries were dead. But basically, this guy is ready to be retired, right? All the marabou that you see me putting on the fish finder jigs, the ones that look like this, I'll show you this one in a second. That's gone, obviously, on this guy because I was picking it off, and I'll try to find the video where I'm picking off all this moss. The Madison River was real low, 700-800 CFS this year. So all that got ripped off. All the paint on the head, which you guys are probably pretty familiar with jigs, if you're banging them along the bottom, kind of a rock hopping, sculpin kind of move, however you want to call it, Euro nymphing it, Euro drifting it is what I call it. You lose the paint on there, right? That's a common thing. I'm going on a steelhead trip here soon, later this week. Gonna put out some content a little early, so I'm tying some furry worms, you know, that kind of stuff. And you know, you got these beautiful heads on these awesome hooks. I mean, look at that thing. You know, I mean, that's a nice hook, Gamakatsu hook on there. I'm gonna make one with pink, you know, maybe a sherbety color. So you want to protect that head. What can you do? You know, we've all banged the paint off. These things are definitely well made, well painted. They probably have a coat on there of some kind of top coat. What I've done with this one here and several other, I'm going to show you right here in my little holder. These guys right here, I'm testing a couple products or ways to do this. You're kind of getting a sneak peek into 2026, what I'm going to be offering and some of my content. But you know, I'm testing kind of the commercial grade product, a seal coat you find at the commercial and hobby lure catalog stores and things like that, like Barlow's and others. This is a seal coat product. It comes in a smaller jar like this. Obviously, you can get bigger stuff, but I'm painting that on with a brush. You know, who knows how many jigs I'm going to do with this. I'll let you know, but I'm painting that on with a brush. And this stuff is kind of weird. It has like a toothpaste consistency to it in there. And it looks like, wow, that would be the last thing I'd want to paint onto my jigs after or right before I wanted to make a nice real jig before my fishing trip. But I'll tell you what, I painted on 2 coats on here this morning while I was doing some other work. And these guys came out beautiful. I have in my little stand here, you know, stick with me at Red Bandy Outdoors. We'll be showing you about what we do with these things. But it helps hold the jig, you know, so I painted them in there and let them set, and then it did a different coat. And it does exactly what the label says. It dries clear, hard, fast, no smell. But it goes on like a real kind of watered down toothpaste. So it looks a little weird. And if you wipe the brush off good and you clean it off, you can reuse it. So that's one product I'm using. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, which is a little bit more easy for folks to get their hands on, is pretty much everywhere. You probably have some in your house, is this Sally Hansen's top coat, the nail hardener top coat version. There's a couple different ones. I don't think any of them really matter. You know, just a clear top coat hardener. To protect all the fancy nails that people do. I think you'll see a little of that on these commercial jigs. You know, I'm going to paint some on these to do a test and see. how it does. Again, you know, this thing was banged along the rocks. To catch 7 fish, you need to get it into a lot of pockets, you know, and so I did. And this guy survived the test, so that's kind of going up as a Wall of Famer for now. You know, that jig survived. Most of the time we lose them for whatever reason. Before that, I would say I don't have the data on it. I'd like to collect some like that, but I think 7 fish, a whole trip, basically with one jig. We did use another jig, the 1/8 one day with my son to catch some fish, so I had to take that one off. But I caught, I think, 7 myself with that 1 or 6, whatever it is. So with the Sally Hansens, you know, you can put that on there, and you see a lot of people doing that. And so I'm using it to test out kind of eyes and what they work, you know, what eyes you can paint them over. I don't know if you guys can see that there, but there's some red eyes on this guy, both sides, and they kind of stick out from the head a little bit, as opposed to the flat kind of pasted on ones you see elsewhere. And so, little sneak peek into some of the stuff I'm dealing with, you know, where you put on a flat eye on that jig, and you can paint right over it with this Sally Hansen. So I'm going to see how effective that is at the chips and dents and stuff like that you get from banging it along the river bottom. So the bobber technique was a real popular video I had. You know, people don't really want to wade, neither do I. So chucking a bobber and doing it effectively is something we're going to talk about quite a bit. We'll do some steelhead cutouts on this trip coming up and talk about the bobber. But I have a line of smaller jigs that I'm kind of trying to figure out here that are on a light wire hook that work for things like the jig stone and my kind of everywhere all the time nymph, the one with the goose biot wings or whatever. But since you got a nice paint job on there, like you see there, this is the Alabama blue craw that you can pick up at Barlow's. Testing it out. What I'm going to do with these is hold them in my stand and just show you guys how I paint on there, what I do. You know, I'm just kind of getting one drop on there and letting it roll around, keeping it out of the eye, and then just moving down to the next one, you know, and keeping that drop fresh. Trying not to get it anywhere on my fly tying material or whatever. It's pretty easy to work with, but just quickly move down in my stand, down some jig heads. You know, my family members complain that this smells or whatever, and they come in here and try to open up the window. It's really not that bad. I don't think I'm losing too many brain cells doing this. But basically, we just work on there, especially the side, you know, where it's going to be pounding into some rocks or whatever. You know, these are all intended to be fished basically on the bobber setup, so underneath it, so you'll be swinging it, not swinging it per se, but it's going to be dragging behind the bobber, and it's going to be moving in and up and down in all those pockets. So it's going to come in contact with some rocks. And so even the small guys here, you know, that will fish as more of like a beadhead nymph kind of imitation. We don't want to be losing the paint on the first cast or anything. So let's get a drop on every one of those, you know, and make sure those get 2 coats real quick, you know. It just kind of adds that extra TLC and confidence out there. You know, that's one of the number one things with fishing is your confidence. And when you have confidence in what you're using, you're going to catch more fish. So the way that I do it is I just rip them out while I'm doing flies. I set them over here. These guys are already done, so they're ready to come to the vise, you know. Put the red dragon worm away, you know, pull out maybe a different one. So then the other thing with jig durability that we want to talk about is hooks. This right here is obviously, you could pull your car out of the ditch with this hook right here. This is overkill for most of the trout that we're catching on my channel. But if you're fishing in areas like I do where there's steelhead and you can bounce this thing in front of a steelhead, you might want to be using something like this. I've caught some steelhead. I'll dig up the photo, hopefully, and put it up where I caught like a 22-incher last year, right? And it bent the hook on one of these commercial guys right here. I can't remember if it was this one. It might have been the Deep V that you see me use. This guy, I think it was one just like this. I'll try to find the picture and put it in for this video. But if you're fishing where you can hook into a steelhead or a salmon, you know, and you want to land it, or big trout, you know, if you're fishing Great Lakes where there's big trout, stuff that I'm going to say is probably over 16, 17. When you're getting up into that class of fish, you probably should switch the hook. You don't need to go this far. Some of just the heat forged, higher quality stuff you see out there from BMC, Owner, Victory, those are good hooks as well, and they come in small sizes for all the jigs that I throw. So that's going to be something that's going to work for those 16 to 24 inch fish, you know, and be just fine. You probably could do a steelhead on that every now and again, but if you're going to be fishing for steelhead and stuff, we're going to switch up to that Gamakatsu, or that Owner, that thicker hook where it's obviously, you know, this thing means business. Here's kind of the upgrade, you know, from the standard wire hook I'm going to show you. And I have that on that tiny little 1/16 pill head jig. It's hard to see, I know. There we go. That's a little better. So that's that. So for this line of jigs here that I talked about on the bobber, you know, you're going to get into a little bit of a lighter wire hook when you use something this small. So, you know, I wouldn't recommend using this on if you're catching stuff that's going to be like over that 16, 17 inch class. You probably want to use a better hook. But most people are in that 10 to 16, 15, 12 inch trout. These things are going to hammer, you know, a little streamer on something like that, a little nymph on something like that, a little stonefly under the bobber. You're going to be able to chuck that all day long into all the pockets that people are struggling to get into. You're going to be able to do it on the small bobber and the medium one that you see me using. So stick with me on Red Mandy Outdoors this year. We're going to be pulling out a lot of cool content. That was just kind of a small taste of what we have. I appreciate you sticking to the end of this video to give all the little tips that I have and see all the little cool stuff I'm going to be pulling out in the stream, catching some fish with. So I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.